As you may be able to tell by now, I started my American Heavy grind a long time ago, and rather than go digging through the archives for a decent T32 game that shows off what it is all about, I figured I would outsource this to one of my clan members. So today's replay is brought to you by Leak Gamer, who is currently at the M103 stage of this grind, and soon enough the T125 is going to be her very first tier 10. So we're watching a player for whom the American Heavy line is the point of reference for their understanding of high tier play. And when sharing this replay with me, she did point out that it's a decent game but not an exceptional one, which is exactly what I'm after for this series. You need to know what you can expect from the T32 heavy tank, not what the one miracle game in a million is going to provide you. I feel that way it's more informative for the people who are preparing to go down the line to know what to expect. Something a bit more illustrative of your average game. Because any tank can get lucky and pull off a miracle result when the conditions are perfect, but I want to know what the average is going to be. What is my common experience with a tank going to be? And this match does a really good job of showcasing the T32. Now, the turret of the T32 is the hardest nut in the game to crack, and ideal circumstances are poking over ridge lines, poking over hull down cover, and using uneven ground to cover the hull for the most part. And the city fight down in the southeast corner of highway does not provide a lot of that. So this replay gives us a chance to see that the T32 handles a level playing field, literally, better than the T29 does. And that's the thing about the T32, it's got all the strengths and capabilities of the T29, but every single aspect of this tank is an improvement over the T29 so that it doubles down on those benefits and also mitigates a lot of the weaknesses and drawbacks of the T29. And it does so in such a way that it opens up a playstyle that the T29 just can't attempt. The T32 is actually a fairly capable brawler. The frontal hull armor is improved to the point that the hull is no longer a complete liability on this vehicle. The base mobility in terms of actual speed, traverse, turret traverse, all improved to the point where it can actually dance about and move freely. And while it's using the exact same gun from the tier before, the T29, the rate of fire on this one has improved so much that it can afford to get involved in a sustained fight to use that damage per minute advantage that it's going to have over a number of its adversaries. So while the T29 is locked into those long-term fights with the enemy kept at arm's length in order to excel, the T32 has the complete freedom to get up close and personal, just get stuck in and stay stuck in. It gets back a little bit of that versatility that the tier 5 and 6 had, but couples it with incredible armor. So when you're a top tier like this, you can get stuck in amongst multiple lower tier targets and just bully them, use your rate of fire to spread the damage out where it needs to be, and against the equal tiered targets, use your durability to survive engagements where your natural rate of fire advantage is going to cut them down faster than they can to you. You can weather the storm while sparing a shot to track your targets and lock them in place so that you just win out on DPM. And then in those cases where you're bottom tier, and let's face it, the penetration on this gun is going to struggle with a lot of the targets up there, you should hopefully have enough mobility and flexibility with the gun depression and so on to play more of the medium style role that you've been accustomed to with the tier 5 and 6, to hopefully get into positions that make those tougher targets vulnerable to you, and just change the dynamics of the fight to suit you. So there's a lot of tools at your disposal to allow you to dictate the terms of an engagement. And because of this, it should be extremely rare that you feel powerless in the T32. You've always got one trick up on the opponent, one advantage that they can't match, a counter to everything that they've got, which goes a long way to undercutting the otherwise unexceptional nature of this vehicle. As I said in the Central Hub video for the American Heavy line, I find it hard to generate much enthusiasm for the T32, but the flip side of that is it's extremely hard to think of a time where I absolutely hated it. Bad games are rare in a tank this strong, and its strength comes from its all-round nature. There's no catastrophic flaws to it, no crippling weakness, no Achilles heel. For a lot of the vehicles in the game considered strong or a threat, they excel in one particular area, and you can start the game, look at the map you've got, and just really regret picking it. The T32 is not one of those tanks. You would be hard pressed to pick a map or a tank lineup where this vehicle is out of its element. It can brawl in a city, it can fight in the open field, it can tank hull down positions, it can lead attacks. This thing has so much flexibility. And the only thing that really lets it down is the fact that it is limited to the same gun that the T29 had in terms of penetration. When it's bottom tier, it's not going to be amazing, and the somewhat derpy accuracy is still a factor. It cannot snipe anywhere near as good as perhaps a Tiger II or a Carnarvon can. And that is pretty damn good going in terms of limitations and drawbacks for a vehicle. Not to mention with the widespread proliferation of premium ammo, one of those drawbacks disappears almost entirely. Now, by this point we've had a pretty decent showcase on how you play the T32. Just point the front of the tank at the enemy and chase after that damage. Don't be afraid to side-scrape when you need to, because your wheels, your tracks run almost the entire side of your hull, given how low profile it is, and that effectively means you've got a decent amount of spaced armor on the side there. Don't get too overwhelmed, because although you've got a decent rate of fire, you're not going to be a one-man army. Always look for those advantageous positions, hull down as much as possible. As far as you are able to, make sure you are always fighting the enemy on your terms rather than theirs. Use your mobility to ensure that those favourable matchups, that favourable ground, is always yours. As you saw earlier on, Leek moved against the 5100 when she had backup so that she was not the sole target, because burst fire versus this tank is always going to come off better. And yet she was happy to sit in the open, blazing away at the T-34-3, as it had a much lower rate of fire than this tank does. She side-scraped out and traded shot for shot with the Centurion, a tank with a gun that is much lower in caliber than her own. And she got in close against the Jagdpanther, a vehicle that is far more accurate than she is, and which is a lot more softly armoured on the top than the head of the T-32. So getting under its gun line to fight over a ridgeline was the vital play to make in that engagement, especially considering that she was a one-shot for it. And now that there is only a Rheinmetall Borsig Waffenträger and a Sture Emil left to deal with, vehicles with tinfoil for armour, she's loaded the high explosive, of which she's carrying the Wargaming recommended loadout of way too many. Probably not a bad idea these days with the abundance of paper-thin tanks out there, such as the recently introduced and grotesquely overpowered Scorpion G, and as you can see, it leaves quite a mark. So this game has gone fairly well. It hasn't looked like Leek's been entirely too challenged at any point in it. The fact that her team hasn't utterly collapsed is definitely a contributing factor to that, but when you look at the final results, or just look at the damage in the top left corner there, it's clear that she's done her share. A high explosive shell should finish this guy off, but she aimed just a little bit too low. Caught it in the track. If it had been in the superstructure, it would have nailed him in one shot. An end result with a high caliber and Confederate medal means that she definitely put in work, which resulted in a top place billing on her team list, and 1100 XP given for her efforts, dishing damage and bouncing it without breaking a sweat. Yeah, no doubt it was a good game played out with discipline and efficiency, and definitely should have carried a sense of achievement.